What I want to do is just spend a little bit of time sharing some, I'll say, perspectives and insights into this area of customer engagement and customer intimacy, who is the customer? And before I came here, I think some of you know that I showed up this morning and I flew in from Chicago. My firm had a conference in Chicago over the last couple of days. We call it our Best Practices Conference. It's focused on agility. And one of the things when you think about agile and you think about being agile as an organization, there's reasons we are that way. And if you think about the world today and some of the things that are happening in terms of the disruptive innovation that's out there, the volatility and extreme volatility, we've seen some of that more recently in the oil and gas industry. We've seen some of that with the exchange rates, especially in the United States in terms of the dollar going up until just recently. And then, even in terms of some of the areas around the competition that's out there. I mean, we're seeing in environments where we have these disintermediating forces coming in and changing the the environment that we engage in a very short amount of time. So what I want to share with you is that if we have to deal with a world like that, we have to be more flexible. We have to be more agile, ability to react to these types of things. And so when you sort of, mirror that back onto the, the function of procurement and what we do, the question becomes is, what does it really mean? And, as you think about, agility, one of the things I wanted to start with in sort of the traditional Hackett fashion, a benchmarking slide. This is actually, and it sort of forces the issue in terms of some of the conversations we were having, earlier today in terms of why are we even talking about some of this stuff? And, this is a particular slide that, just goes back about a decade looking at, the traditional value that, we've been delivering and we focus on and, people have expectations that we deliver back to organizations. It has to do with spend cost savings. We spent some time this morning in our 2030 discussion talking about, where do we want that value to be and understanding that it's, most likely is going to change over time. We're still in an environment where the majority of organizations, are still measuring this as a primary value component of procurement. And it's a challenge. And if you see where we are today and why it has to change on a go-forward basis, there is some leveling off. And as a result of that, we're going to have to figure out other ways to deliver value. And when we did a study last year, we do some of these key issue studies and we ask organizations, what's top of mind as you look into the next year? When we did this study last year, one of the areas that came through was this idea of innovation. That we need to enable the innovation of organizations. And one of the things I was telling procurement organizations for several years is that our companies, we're out of the downturn. That was back in 2009, 2010, 2011. We're out of that. Our companies have moved on. The focus is on top line growth. And the way that we were looking at top line growth was through product expansion, new products, et cetera. So the question is, how do we enable that kind of behavior within our organizations? Well, when we, and that was several years ago, and last year, lo and behold, when we asked this question, procurement organizations and leaders have said, hey, innovation is something that we're important of. We had a roundtable or our conference last year, and I had a whole bunch of folks in the room, and I was talking about innovation. The first question I asked them, I said, listen, as you think about innovation, how many of you see innovation as one of your priorities as an organization? Guess what? Every single person in that room raised their hand. Now, if I asked the question this year as to how many of you were successful in that priority that you had identified last year, how many people do you think would raise their hand? So I'd asked that this year, and I asked that yesterday, as a matter of fact. Few. So, we see it as a priority, but we haven't necessarily been able to, focus on it. When we ask the same question this year, organizations in terms of what are your priorities as you look into the next year, and this is coming into 2015, what were your priorities looking into next year? What we saw is a couple of things. And we added, we mixed it up a little bit, and we added a couple of things to the list. This idea of being a trusted advisor, that actually came out of a study that we did and some, information we had from the summertime, an article that we, tried to characterize some of these core things that we see really driving the performance of these top performing, procurement organizations around the world. And one of these was around this idea of acting as a trusted business advisor. And the question then becomes is, what does that mean? How do you define that? And guess what? We don't define it for ourselves. Other folks define it for us. We sought after, for advice as they go make decisions. It's sort of like I use the analogy, the President of the United States. I mean, he has his, select set of advisors. He does not make decisions without conferring with those advisors. The question is, if we think we are that, our organizations, our businesses, et cetera, are making decisions with us or without us, as part of that. And these are indicators in terms of looking at yourself. Are you truly that advisor that many of us aspire to be? The other thing you see on third on this list is the idea about agility. And we look at that as companies. It's the ability to react to changes much more quickly. I mean, we can't always forecast what's going to happen. Few people knew that oil was going to come down, like it did over the last 6 months. Few people know where it's actually going to go. I wish I did.